After a traumatic accident or incident, we usually tell that person that they're lucky to be alive. Take, for example, Lieutenant Kegan SMURF Gill, a lieutenant in the Navy, an aviator, who found himself floating in the ocean after an F-18 Hornet wreck with multiple injuries. Now, usually the story stops there. We hear the story, and that's it. We don't hear what happens afterwards, after the medication, after the pain, after acclimating back to life. And society kind of tells us that it's rude, and we're not allowed to ask those questions. Lucky for us, Kegan's willing to sit down and tell us what happened after the accident, how he was overmedicated, how he sustained injuries that lasted for years, how some injuries went undetected and didn't pop up till years later. Join Ken-Zee and I as we get to interview this amazing person and hear his story after the accident and what's wrong with Big Pharma. This is a Broken Reel Media production, and you're listening to the Something's Wrong Here podcast.
Check one, yo. Check two, check three, yo. Check 1, 2, 3, let's go.
Welcome back to the Something's Wrong Here podcast. I am Randy.
I'm Ken-Zee.
And joining us with an amazing story is Kegan SMURF Gill, a retired USN lieutenant. Before we get started, I've just got to know, what is with the call sign SMURF?
Yeah, so that's a pretty hard-earned call sign, and it kind of ties into the story I'm going to tell you guys here shortly, which I guess I can elaborate on it then. Typically, pilots say you're supposed to buy them a drink for them to tell you the call sign, but I'll make an exception, and I'll get into that a little with the story.
Well, if you ever come to Kansas City, all the drinks are on us. So.
Actually, we're going to be shipping you out a little something that we do with some of those triangle playing guys, so we'll take care of you there.
Nice.
So tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a former Navy F-18 pilot. It's probably my biggest claim to fame in the world these days. I had a pretty wild experience back in January of 2014. I was a young Navy lieutenant in my first fleet squadron. I was out on a dynamic mission over the Atlantic Ocean, pushing my aircraft to the edge of its capabilities, really living my dream at the controls of this F-18. And suddenly something went terribly wrong. Trapped in an out-of-control dive, the jet blared, altitude, pull up. In 2 seconds before impacting the ocean, at 695 miles per hour, I yanked the ejection handle between my legs, and I then found out that the human body is not aerodynamic at the speed of sound. Impacting the sound barrier with my body was devastating. Caused a traumatic brain injury, ripped my helmet off my head, shattered my neck, my shoulder, both my upper arms, my left forearm, extensive upper body nerve damage, artery damage. The gear on my vest all ripped off. My legs flailed violently, shattering both my legs, and then I plummeted into the icy cold, churning Atlantic swell. And things went from bad to worse when my parachute that had just saved my life started to sink underneath the icy cold current and getting me under with it. And as you can imagine, if you've ever been held under and you need a breath of air, that terrible feeling, it was just that over and over and over again for about 2 hours. As I was drug under, everything went black. About 2 weeks later, the lights started to come back on. Everything smelled of disinfectant. I realized I was paralyzed, and miraculously, I'd been rescued by a Navy helicopter and delivered to a level 1 trauma center. But the prognosis was grim. The docs told me I'd never use my arms or legs again. My flying career was over. But if you want a fighter pilot to do something, tell them it's impossible. And 2-year miraculous rehabilitation, surgery, rehab, repeat. I kicked the pain meds, and against all odds, I returned to the cockpit of the F-18 Super Hornet as an active duty pilot. And this should be where the happy ending is, but this is really where things eventually take a turn to get much more difficult than what I just described. I had been back flying for about 2 years, and that had taken a toll on me. The constant high G, high stress, lack of sleep, constantly burning the candle at both ends. A miraculous point where I had an unresolved brain injury that went unrecognized, and I had a pressurization system malfunction in the aircraft occur. And when that pressurization system malfunction occurred, It caused rapid decompression, which added insult to injury of my underlying brain injury and kind of pushed me over the edge. And I started to struggle really bad as my mental faculties unraveled. I found myself miraculous to the point where I wasn't going to be able to fly aircraft anymore, and reluctantly went into medical, which when you're in a high-speed position in the military, the last thing you want to have to do is go into medical, because it jeopardizes not only your medical clearance, but your security clearance, and can very quickly end your flying career that we'd worked so hard to achieve. The only answer I really got was delayed onset PTSD diagnoses and pills, and more pills. And that's when my life really spun out of control. I found myself miraculous, a shell of who I was, unrecognizable to my wife and to myself, dealing with severe mental health issues, persistent insomnia, and starting to fall in and out of psychoses. So just unable to distinguish between my imagination and reality. I was eventually medically retired, and I continued that same treatment through the VA, which was just more problems, more pills, more problems. Miraculous things continued to devolve until one day my wife found me completely bare ass naked. I'd shaved my hair off in chunks, my eyebrows, my facial hair. I had a black garbage bag tied around my neck like a cape because I thought I was going to go fight crime out in the snowy weather like naked Batman. Instead, I found myself living in an inpatient psychiatric facility run by the VA, where I witnessed and experienced truly abysmal care to American veterans, miraculous deprivation, confinement. We were literally dressed like prisoners in prison scrubs while the staff members wore white lab coats. And there was this sort of Stanford prison experiment dynamic that occurred. When we did get to go outside, maybe once a week, it was into a concrete yard surrounded by high-rise metal fencing and high-rise brick buildings. There was no sunlight, no nutrition, no sleep. Every 15 minutes at night, they'd wake you up with a flashlight in the face as part of their safety protocol to make sure that you were safe. Miraculous. These are the same things you do to a prisoner of war. These are the same things you do to disrupt someone until they break. And they're doing it to American veterans in the worst point of their lives. You can do this stuff to a perfectly healthy military member going through survival training. And after a few days, they'll start to have visual and auditory hallucinations. And you take people who are already in that place and you do the same shit to them. What do you think's going to happen? Miraculous. The only answer they did give us was pills, and more pills. I tried to escape from that facility unsuccessfully. Eventually, my family was able to get me out of there. I spent about 40 days in the facility. And when I got out, I was just even more of a broken shell of a man in a drug-induced stupor. And things got pretty dark. The only thing holding my family together was my wife's fear that should we divorce, I might gain partial custody of our kids and harm him in another unpredictable psychoses. Miraculous. Things were looking pretty bleak. And I was really fortunate to come across a network of nonprofit organizations that allowed me to gain access to healing modalities that actually could heal the brain injury and the underlying physiology that was damaged. And on a deeper level, to heal my friggin' soul that had been through this betrayal from the government that I had served honorably. And miraculous, I'm here today and I get to talk to people and speak out about this. And I want everyone to know what it's really like in these facilities, because we have an active war on mental health going on, and it's taken prisoners. And those prisoners include American veterans who serve their country. So it's, anyways, honor to be here. That's a real nutshell version of the story. I'm sure we can dive more into it, but miraculous.
Perfect intro, I believe here. So with that, let's back up to the pills, right? That's what we're here to talk about tonight, is what's wrong with Big Pharma. With regard to the pills, you were prescribed your first dose of gabapentin at above recommended dosage for any adult human.
Miraculous.
For what it was given to you for. Let's just start there. I have a fun way that I like to phrase this. I think we should deport the Sacklers, but we'll go back to that one later on. Walk us through what it was like with what you were prescribed. What absolute chaos ensued from that?
Yeah, so backing up to after the ejection, and I was living in a poly trauma center also run by the VA, and I was just relearning how to walk, use my arms again, but I was an inpatient. So I was kind of at the mercy of the VA facility there in Richmond, Virginia, where Miraculous main modality was pharmaceutical drugs. And before even asking for it, I was on oxycodone, OxyContin, tramadol, trazodone, amitriptyline, and 2,400 milligrams a day of gabapentin, also known as Neurontin. Miraculous is supposed to be a safer alternative to the opiates, but I actually found that stuff to be far more devastating than the opiates I was taking. But yeah, that was really, the food quality was terrible. They're waking you up all night in the poly trauma center too, where these are guys who are trying to recover from extreme physical injuries, multiple broken extremities, missing limbs, severe spinal injuries, and you're not getting sleep. You're not getting good nutrition. And instead, you're just getting pumped full of drugs. And it's no surprise that typically the prognosis is pretty grim.
So you're over-medicated. You have paranoia, delusions. You're now committed. And you're basically going through prisoner of war drills. At one point, you even had to heavily medicated. They had you pretty much self-commit yourself by signing a bunch of papers, correct?
Miraculous. Yeah, so this is fast forward several years after I'd returned to flying and started to deal with some of the mental health issues associated with my brain injury, eventually being medically retired and finding myself living in an inpatient psychiatric facility. It was absolutely the same treatment that parallels being a prisoner of war. I called it being a prisoner of the war on mental health that is raging beneath the veneer of our civilization currently. But they had me on just more pills than I knew what I was taking. I went in on just high doses of a medication called quetiapine that I was taking initially just for insomnia. But as time went on, it's just the same thing that always happens with pharmaceuticals in our current medical system is you just need more and more and more. And with the increased dosage, the side effects get worse and worse. And so once I was in that facility, I don't even know what all they had me on. When I did try to resist and say, I don't want to just take these drugs, I see what's going on here. You are poisoning people. You are sleep depriving people. You are malnourishing people. You are treating them less than human. I planned an escape. I pulled the fire alarm one night, hoping that they would let us out for the fire drill. But apparently somebody had already tried that trick. Miraculously, instead, I was forcibly injected with a medication called Haldol, which felt like insects crawling their way out from underneath my skin, all across my skin and all my body. All I wanted to do was run and scream and rip my own skin off my body. Once I eventually crashed from that medication, which was probably 45 minutes to an hour of just excruciating discomfort, seriously, a torturous experience. I came to what I think was maybe the next day. It might have been 2 days. I kind of lost track. I was literally drooling on myself, and I was wheeled into a room with an individual that was supposed to be my legal representation. Now, I hadn't committed any crime. I had been voluntarily admitted to this facility to be treated for a severe mental health incident. And miraculously, I had this person that was supposed to be my protection legally, slide a pen into my hand and have me scribble on all these different documents that at this point I couldn't even read. I had no idea what I was doing. She was just kind of moving me around like a little baby. And what I ended up doing is I apparently had committed myself to this facility. So now I could no longer leave at my own will, which honestly, I already couldn't. They wouldn't let me leave at my own will, even though I had been voluntarily admitted. Now I had been committed to the facility, which added even more layers of bureaucracy to get out. It stripped me of my Second Amendment right to bear arms, which is absolutely ludicrous. I hadn't committed any crime. I hadn't harmed anybody. Miraculous. And it also put me on the law enforcement information network as if I had committed a crime. So now if I get pulled over by the police, I pop up in that network as like a criminal, basically. And I was just an American veteran who was trying to get help for severe injuries that I had incurred while in service. And instead, I found myself being stripped of my constitutional unalienable rights, which is pretty unacceptable in my mind. Miraculous.
With all this treatment, the stories get around to other veterans and everything. How discouraging is that for people to actually go in and get help when they feel like they need it?
It's absolutely discouraging because, I kind of even had my own command hinting like if I was going to seek help for what was going on, it was going to end poorly. And as soon as I started seeking help, my XO of my squadron, the second in command of my squadron, sat me down one day and he said, "So did they dig their talons into you yet?" And he knew as soon as you go into mental health, miraculously, you're done. They're going to scoop you up with their talons. They're going to load you with drugs, and that's when your life unravels. And I've met so many other, high performing service members, largely in the special forces community, be it Green Berets, SEALs, MARSOC, Rangers, all these incredible human beings who were not only physically, but very mentally capable individuals operating at high levels, go through almost the exact same experience that I had when they started to experience issues related to brain injury and the toll that operating in those environments can take on your brain and your body. So it's absolutely discouraging. And it remains to this day, I think, largely where if you try to seek help for mental health, and not only in the military, but in the professional world outside, it can often have negative effects on your career. And I think there's a much better way to deal with it. I think we can focus on health optimization. I think that should be something that's standard for especially people that they're putting millions of dollars in to train, be it special forces members or fighter pilots. They're putting millions of dollars in to train you. They should spend a little bit of money to do annual testing of your lab work and give you customized nutraceutical protocols, to give you holistic health treatments, to get things ahead of, before they become a serious issue. And not only would you get better performance of the person in the military, they'd have a longer career, they'd have a happier, healthy life, a happier, healthy family. It would be a win-win. And on the back end, now you're going to save all that money from sending somebody in on disability who's now got to get medication the rest of their lives and surgeries the rest of their lives. So the amount of money that it would take proactively would be far smaller than what it's costing in the long run.
My question is, why would they do that? We don't do that in America. We treat the symptoms. We don't treat to prevent. We don't do any of that. So what benefit do the insurance companies and everybody else have who make their money off of it?
Miraculous. Exactly it. The business model has overruled the health of American citizens and veterans. And that's unfortunately just the reality of it. We have a very successful business model for our health industry. But if we look at the health, it does not align with the amount of money being spent. But these companies, they do profit off of people's ailments and keeping you sick. And so that's the direction things have slowly tipped over time. And it's getting to a tipping point where it's become blatantly obvious that that's what's happening. And people are disconnecting from the mainstream medical system because it's just making people sick. And I think there's a complete lack in trust that's growing for our current medical system, that physicians have basically been indoctrinated into a system that has made them a drug pusher. And I know a lot of physicians, and they're extremely frustrated by it, the realities of it. But they see it too. Not all physicians do, but a lot of them see what's happening. And yeah, it's just a business model. The insurance industry makes a lot of money off of it. The pharmaceutical industry makes a lot of money off of it. And unfortunately, curing people's ailments and actually helping the underlying issue is not the most profitable way to do it. And even the modalities that I've experienced have largely been either already illegal or the FDA is being used as basically an enforcer for the pharmaceutical industry to make a lot of these modalities unavailable or illegal or block them from coming to market, including a whole variety of peptides, all sorts of things that are only showing benefit for people that are being actively blocked. Miraculous, these agencies are not looking out for people's health. They're looking out for their own interests, which is the pharmaceutical industry, which is a revolving door. People literally go from a pharmaceutical company developing a drug to go work at the FDA to approve their own drug. And after it's approved, they go back to their pharmaceutical company to work. So it's like this incredible, incestuous relationship between the two that has really broken our healthcare system.
As being one of the brilliant people who got the Johnson & Johnson shot right before the blood clots announcement came out, I want to dive into talking about the money and also the pills like you were just a second ago.
Miraculous.
Has it crossed your mind as a veteran before with the war on terror, where not a lot of WMDs got discovered, but we were also protecting some of the largest opium exporting countries? I don't mean to be a shithead. There genuinely is a break right there. And I have my own questions and I don't want to be weird about them, but with regard to your thoughts, like you served the military, you come back, you get over medicated, and it's on the stuff that we're protecting.
Miraculous. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, I have no doubt that a lot of our reason for being in the Middle East was not related to ending terrorism, but to promote the defense industry and maybe that industry as well, the pharmaceutical industry, and protecting their source of medicine. Miraculous. So yeah, it's pretty frustrating to think about.
I heard a pretty fucked up thought, just cutting through the thought process quickly with the sugarcoating.
Miraculous.
And the war machine complex that everyone responds to and everyone talks about and everyone has this political point or whatever. And I don't care about politics at all. But with that regard,
Miraculous
that I heard that was pretty messed up is that the Big Pharma complex is the subtle shadow to the war machine complex that exists. And hearing something like what you're talking about with your over medication and everything, and also with what you were, what you signed up to do, elaborate if you don't mind. Like, I'd love to hear any of the thought process that you have on any of it.
Miraculous. I mean, the pharmaceutical industry, I think, is even larger and more profitable and influential than the defense industry. And we've seen the way the defense industry over the past several generations has turned something that was originally a good thing to have. Like, you need national defense for a country to exist in the modern world. Miraculous started to see that you can make a lot of money off of war. Miraculous, you make money off of the weapons and developing new technologies, but you make money off of rebuilding afterwards too. Like companies like Halliburton that go in after we destroy a country and get to rebuild it. So all those folks have massive influence over the decision-making process within our government. And the scary thing is the fact that the pharmaceutical industry makes the profiting of the defense industry look minuscule in comparison. Miraculous. Now, with all that additional clout and financial capability, they're doing the exact same pattern that our defense industry went down. Originally, it was something good that was designed to give people health and give them products that can help with their health. Miraculous, it's turned into a business model. And they've discovered that you make a lot of money off of making and keeping people sick. And so, again, it's that one of the oldest things of time is the greed of humanity destroying itself. I mean, this story has been told miraculous time and time again. And as you all know, the history just keeps going in circles. And maybe it's a spiral. Maybe we're ascending in some way. But yeah, it's the same story as the defense industry went down. That's what the pharmaceutical and insurance industries are doing now. And now they've gotten to a point where they have so much influence and clout that they're miraculous. Yeah, they're making people sick and they don't even have to hide it anymore. Miraculous.
Like the Mark Twain version of history doesn't repeat itself, but it always rhymes. Because World War II isn't going to look anything like World War III, right? That's our Civil War I versus Civil War II, whatever we hit first. I mean, at this point, if history rhymes, we're not going to dive down the dark path too much there. But I kind of wanted to correlate with regard to Big Pharma and like the Coalition for a Drug-Free America, which is now the whatever foundation to end addiction or whatever the hell they changed their name to. It's sponsored by all the big drug corporations. It's sponsored by all the big pharma, big oil, everything that we just talked about, Middle East and problematically speaking, in this systematic relationship.
Miraculous.
You speak to, do you have thoughts that some of this is just literally all market pushed psyop bullshit to make sure that the people of this country are in the dark? And I know that comes across real harsh, but
miraculous, I think,
experience the ultimate. So I know people, we've had a guest on this podcast who the broken bones,
miraculous,
a lot of them similar to you. I'm never going to compare injuries on this, but the guy was hit by a head-on driver at 60 miles an hour. That's a real bad day. And I work with this fella, and it's like, man, there's a lot to unpack there. And I just am curious on your thoughts, whether, like the American Heart Association is sponsored by everyone who makes bacon.
Miraculous.
Coalition for a Drug-Free America is sponsored by all the fucking drug companies who don't want you to know about Ibogaine or don't want you to have psilocybin because it might be a one-hit treatment. And I'm curious as to your thoughts on some of the Yeah, it's humorous, but the deep, dark absurdities of the world we've created for a middle class.
Miraculous. It's, the Diabetes Association has ties into Cadbury chocolate and all these sugar manufacturers. Like, it's madness, man. And it's the same story. It's just these industries have, as a company, their interest is their number one focus is producing revenue for their stockholders. Miraculous, their duty is to make it profitable every quarter so that the people that own the company make money. And unfortunately, over time, Miraculous, with poor ethics and all the corruption in our government and country that exists, just as being human and humanity that it always has been, it's devolved into what it's devolving into now. I think we're really fortunate that we get to talk about it on podcasts like this, and more people are disconnecting from the mainstream media because more and more are seeing it, that it is bullshit, that it is a psyop, that it is being influenced by the CIA and actors that no longer serve the American public. Instead, they serve industry. I mean, the CIA is another one of those miraculous government that's been overtaken largely by industry. Miraculous doing the bidding of industry instead of the American people. We're seeing a lot of coordination between all of these different facets. And at the end of the day, it's almost would be easier if there was just one evil guy at the top of this whole system that you could take out. But it's so much more insidious than that, because it's the entire bureaucratic establishment. It's the industries themselves, the companies. All of this stuff has just been manipulated and corrupted over time. Miraculous. I think the best thing we can do is, one, talk about it and call it for what it is. I say dissent is patriotic. I don't hate our country. I don't like our government currently and the direction we're going, because it doesn't serve the people as it's supposed to. And instead, it's stripping away people's rights. It's stripping away people's financial capabilities through the absurd inflation that is plaguing the lower and middle class. And the middle class is evaporating at this point. And we're seeing this increase in wealth gap that's just crushing our country and making more and more people more and more poor, for a few people to have bigger yachts. Anyways, I'm just kind of rambling and ranting at this point, but it's very frustrating to see. I think the best thing that we can do is talk about it and try to be kind to one another and realize that we're kind of all on the same team here. Us as the American people, like, we all want the same things for our friends and family and selves. We want to be happy and healthy and have opportunity. We want to have the ability to pursue our dreams, which is what our country's supposed to be all about. And I think it's awesome that we're starting to see more and more on these podcasts and alternative media sources that people are talking about the bullshit that's going on. And we're fed up about it. And I think there already is a revolution taking place, because more and more people are disconnecting from that system. People are becoming figuring out how to heal themselves holistically, where they don't have to go into the pharmaceutical industry and ask for the pills. People are, figuring out how to do more and more things themselves. And I think that's the way we're going to change. It's just by changing ourselves and our own habits and behaviors to where we vote with our dollar, because that's the only vote I think we still have left that's valid. And if we spend our money on the things that are crushing us, we spend our money on shit we don't need that supports this industry by being a consumer, we're supporting all the shit that's going wrong. So the less you need, the more you can be independent. And the more you can just spread kindness and happiness to the people close to you, miraculous, that system's just going to go off and crumble. There's an outstanding book. It's called Atlas Shrugged. Miraculous, to kind of summarize it, it's about this dystopian future where humanity is just in all these crises. Miraculous falling apart. Miraculous, the society starts to notice that the intelligent people and the creative people and all these folks like that just start to disappear. And nobody knows where they're going or what's happening. And then things just get worse and worse, because now those people are leaving. But as time comes on, like, more people are leaving the system that's collapsing to create a new society on the periphery. And then when that system collapses, it ends up not really being a huge disaster, because almost everybody is already transferred over to a more beautiful way of living. And I think that's what we're kind of on the cusp of happening right now in our society. And hopefully it happens before complete destruction and disaster that's unrepairable, or someone starts the nuclear war. But I think we still got a good chance, because that is happening currently. People are discovering regenerative agriculture, ways to heal the land and the forest and eat healthier food that's not poisoning us as most of the mainstream food system is. I've got a lot of hope for things that are happening. And I see it where I live in rural northern Michigan, that there's more and more people getting out of the cities, getting out of that corporate life and just disconnecting from it and not feeding the system anymore. And without being fed with consumerism and our taxes and all that, it's going to start collapsing. And it already is.
Agreed. One question I had, though, is that you mentioned before in some of your other interviews that you kind of came to a crossroad and you got off the medication and you came across a book and also came across some psychedelic therapy and treatment. Can you go into that at all?
Miraculous. Yeah. So when I was really struggling and very desperate because the stuff they were giving me wasn't working. And when I came out of that psychiatric facility, they had me on probably another dozen psych meds at that point, plus quetiapine. And I was becoming non-functional. I could barely read a paragraph. I could barely do the dishes. Miraculous. I was a miserable human to be around. And physically, I didn't even look like the same person. I was all like kind of scrawny and skinny fat. And like I couldn't physically perform anywhere near what I used to be able to do. And I fortunately found a book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, which goes into dealing with mental health issues through the use of psychedelic assisted therapy or indigenous medicine or entheogens or whatever you want to call them. And so I started to pursue that. And I reached out to some nonprofit organizations and miraculously accepted into one called Heroic Hearts Project. And through their generosity, they flew me down to Peru, where I got to experience ayahuasca with the Shipiba natives. And we just had an absolutely life-changing perspective shift. Miraculous medicine, it sort of shredded away all of my five senses. And miraculous, for the first time, experienced reality without the limitations of my human body or perception. And in that place, I fell into this terrifying, hellish darkness that was brutal. But in that place, I found this terrified little boy curled up in the fetal position. Miraculous. And I realized that was me. And in that place, I felt something I had never truly experienced wholeheartedly before. And something told me that I was loved. And with that, my heart just erupted like a supernova. I felt connection, awe radiating through everything. Miraculous wasn't just some hallucination. This was a remembering of who I really was, what we really are at our core. And it changed me forever at my core. Miraculous integration support with a focus on nutrition, movement, meditation, reconnection to nature and community. I started to rebuild my life. And as my brain and body and soul started to heal, so did my family. And now I get to be a capable human being with this wild experience that can articulate what countless others are experiencing that are never going to have the opportunity to talk about it. Miraculously, they've just been crushed by it, or they're no longer here with us, either because these facilities have taken their lives with the medications, or they took their own lives. But I want to speak out on their behalf. And for all the other people that are out there today suffering because our systems are failing us.
So with what you just said, I relate a lot to it. I feel like I've got imposter syndrome right now, but obviously without anywhere near the trauma that you've gone through and everything else.
Miraculous.
I found my happy place in nature. And the experience that you're kind of talking about here with what you had in Peru, ironically, we went to Peru, and that's where mine occurred. But it wasn't on ayahuasca. It was on 17,000 feet of mountain elevation and hiking up to Monte Lake. And I'm curious to hear your thought process to Big Pharma versus nature for a second, because both what you said about Peru and then also where I'm clicking is, again, I feel miraculously every one of your words when it like clicks in and realizes I'm here for something. I don't know what, maybe, but I'm here for something. That clicked and hit me in Peru. What are your thoughts on nature versus Big Pharma?
Yeah, I'm a deep believer in that the further we drift from nature, the sicker we become. And we have a society that has tried to separate us from nature. where we're no longer getting natural sunlight. We don't have normal circadian rhythms, which affects our sleep. We're taking all these substances. We got caffeine in the morning to get us going. We got alcohol at night to bring us down, which both destroy our sleep. We're not getting outside. We're not getting fresh air. We're sitting in office spaces. We're sitting in office buildings. We're breathing recycled air. We're not getting sunlight. We're eating food that is so far removed from nature. I mean, you pick up the typical box of food and you look at the ingredients, and most of it's not even pronounceable or recognizable because it's not food. And so when we live in a society that's like that, of course, people are going to get sick. And then the remedy that everyone wants is the easy pill. And that's what Big Pharma is happy to provide. And that's what the medical drug pushers, aka the physicians, are trained to do, is to put you on these pills. And it, again, just disconnects you further and further from nature. And instead,
Oh, you're talking about only treating the symptom, not the cure pill. There's never a cure pill. It's always a just at the moment, right?
Yeah, I mean, these are all pills that the pharmaceutical industry push are designed to mask symptoms, not deal with the underlying issue. In almost every case, there may be very few select pharmaceutical drugs that don't act like that, but for the most part, that's how they act. Yeah, and on the other hand, you have nature, and it turns out you don't need a doctor, you don't need pills, you don't need any of this shit to heal yourself. You don't even need the nonprofits. I was fortunate that I got a kind of a jump start into my healing journey, but really the things that are healing me is the fact that I prioritize 8 hours of sleep a night so that my brain and body can repair themselves. I don't drink caffeine. I don't drink alcohol. I don't use cannabis. I don't use anything that disrupts my sleep at any level. And so I get better sleep, which heals me without any help. I eat better. I only eat whole, real food as close to the natural source as possible. I go hunting and eat animals that I catch in my land that are minimally processed. I grow a lot of my own food. My wife grows a lot of her own food, or we shop at the farmer's market locally and we get things as close to home, which not only makes us healthier, but it disconnects us from this industrial system of the food system that is crushing our country right now and making people sick because the food itself is sick. The soil is sick. The animals are sick. And when you eat sick, miserable animals, you become a sick, miserable animal because you literally are what you eat. You put it in your mouth, the little organisms in our gut, the trillions of little microorganisms, allow that to interact and facilitate all the cells and functions of our body. And so when we're eating sick poisons, what's that? Yeah.
Is that their goal?
Whose goal?
The big food industry.
Oh, yeah.
Pump us full of this.
Well, I mean, I have no doubt that they have ties, and the same people that own these big food manufacturers own the big pharma companies, and they're making profit off of both ends of it. The same people selling the cure are selling the sickness. Yeah.
The good thing is that the people are getting a little bit of power back. Luckily, they're holding companies like Monsanto and, the Sacklers with the Purdue Pharma. The courts are finally allowing people to take action against these harmful chemicals and everything. And like you said, we're kind of on that precipice, which I feel like we're finally getting to where at least we'll get some honesty from these companies and maybe some change. That, we're going to hit them where it counts as the dollar. If they're going to have to pay out these multi-billion-dollar lawsuits, at some point they're going to get tired of it and hopefully start changing things for the better to where we get, chemicals that we can actually understand and read on the back of our food. And, I do think it's headed in the right direction, but I still feel like we're a long way off from that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we're kind of on the turning point right now. I think it's gotten so bad that it's almost impossible to ignore for people, which is maybe a good thing in a way. And hopefully we can continue to reverse this action. But I feel there's a wave coming of change of a lot of exciting things. Ibogaine and psychedelics are becoming a mainstream topic. We just had Brett Favre talking out about his experience at Ambio using Ibogaine and how it was so profound for him dealing with his nervous system dysfunction after having an incredible career of just getting hit every single day and having to deal with CTE and brain injury and nervous system dysfunction. And the profound effect it's had on him.
Synthetic psychedelic?
Yeah, it's not synthetic. It's derived from a root bark of iboga, which is a shrub from West Africa. I personally have experienced iboga several times and worked with that medicine pretty extensively. And ibogaine is about, if you take iboga itself is about 60% ibogaine and a number of other alkaloids that are psychoactive that have this incredible effect on the body. But ibogaine is when they just take that one compound from the iboga and administer it, which is the most common way that you see it being administered in more medical type facilities and clinical settings. For dealing with addiction is huge. You know, people coming off of heroin or extreme alcoholism, they can take just one session with ibogaine and they get this entire reset of the dopamine system. It basically makes you no longer have cravings because it completely resets the nervous system and the dopamine receptors in whatever your addiction is. If that's overeating, if it's porn, if it's whatever, it completely resets. So you no longer have this like constant grasping for everything. And it has a ton of other benefits for the nervous system. It boosts a protein in your brain that we have a high level of when we're toddlers. And when you get that protein boosted, the brain and nervous system gets to regenerate as if you were a child again. And so you can come off that experience and go right into your old habits. And, you know, you might not have a lot of success, but you also get this opportunity to rebuild yourself into whatever you want to be with this reset of your nervous system and brain and the accelerated brain growth and development that comes with it. Yeah, there's some truly miraculous things that are coming out of the indigenous medicine space that I think are a huge tool for healing people. I'm not saying they're for everybody.
Did American pharmaceutical companies suppress hallucinogens or ibogaine or psilocybin, whatever it may be, because it's just not profitable?
Yeah, I don't think it fits their business model. And in fact, it'll make a lot of their products obsolete. And so they're doing everything in their power to crush this stuff and delay it coming to market. I was just out in Washington, D.C. this past last August, and we were advocating for MDMA assisted therapy using ecstasy for treating post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, the company Lykos had partnered with the FDA to create this study, or not partnered, but worked with the FDA to create a study so that they could get this thing approved. And they went through every little loophole. Lykos went through every single loophole that the FDA said they needed to do to create this clinical study. And that company invested millions of dollars into doing it. And the results of that study showed profound impact on the veterans that had been treated for PTSD. There was something like a 70+% of positive benefit that had lasting, durable results. Over 85% of the people had positive changes from it. And I think over 75% no longer met the criteria for being diagnosed with PTSD. But it was just 2 or 3 sessions with that medicine with a therapist caused complete change in these people's lives, and something that there is no other commercially available product to deal with that's come anywhere close to that. The options that are legal have maybe a 25 to 30% effective rate for dealing with PTSD. And this stuff just blew that all out of the water. And we were all in DC really hopeful it was going to get passed. Basically, it had to go to the FDA so that they could reschedule it, because MDMA is currently a Schedule 1 narcotic, which means it has no medical value, is highly addictive and dangerous, and we can't touch it. So all that they were trying to do was to get that rescheduled so that we could move forward with clinical trials and research and start to get this stuff available to treat people with PTSD that are suffering. And no surprise, the pharmaceutical industry weaseled their way right into the FDA, because that's who really runs the show there, and said nay. When it came to a vote, the board members said no, even though this was a study that the FDA helped develop to be approved. They ended up saying that the study was flawed, and so MDMA assisted therapy could not be approved. So there's a tremendous amount of bureaucratic bullshit, but I still think that the wave that is coming, especially with ibogaine now, they're going to have a hard time. Texas just passed, I think, $50 million of funding for researching and advancing the use of ibogaine that was matched by private donation of another $50 million. So $100 million going in to advance that medicine in Texas. And we're seeing similar efforts throughout the country starting to unfold. So I think we're on the right foot. I think there's a wave that's coming and it's starting to hit, but it's going to be a fight, no doubt.
I think with that being said, though, with that fight, once it gets accepted and legislation passed, the problem I see is that it's still going to land in the hands of Big Pharma, and they're going to be the ones that have full control of it. Am I wrong about that, or is it most likely Big Pharma will be the one distributing it and having control of all of it?
I mean, I think there is a push for that from them. They're trying to develop their own synthetic variants of these substances so that they can administer them and sell them and make profit off of them. But I also see something else developing on the side, which is a different approach to it, which isn't necessarily like a clinical medical setting, but having these ceremonial spaces. There's a number of different churches that are starting to be approved through that direction where they can use this as a sacrament and administer it. There's a lot of other developments that are taking place to help get these medicines accessible to people. And there's a whole underground scene that is just growing and growing. And I think pharma is definitely going to have part of this. I think they're going to get their fingers in the pie and they're going to do everything they can to just have control of it because that's what they do for their business interests. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of other developments that are taking place that are going to make this stuff accessible in its more natural form in a more ceremonial setting, which I think is the ideal way to experience this. There are the indigenous wisdom keepers that have held this medicine and kept it sacred for thousands of years, to prehistory times. That's who should be in charge of this medicine, in my mind. We just got to figure out
Big Pharma with it.
I
mean, I'm serious. Would you ever trust the Johnson & Johnson psilocybin pill or the Pfizer Ibogaine?
I think there's ketamine clinics. Ketamine is a pharmaceutical drug that is a psychedelic that has positive effects for people, at least in the short term. It also can be fairly addictive, but it's better than nothing. I think if people can gain access at least to some of these that are provided by the pharmaceutical industry and get some relief, I think that's better than nothing. And the reality is I think there's going to be multiple options for how you access this medicine. And the pharmaceutical industry will certainly be one of them. And if that's who ends up getting it available at the VA and people start to get some relief through a pharmaceutical version, maybe that's better than nothing at least.
Did you, by chance, it happened pretty much today. Have you seen the breaking news with all the arrests and everything that was made with all these from people with false medical claims to doctors overprescribing? There's basically, I think 300 and some were arrested and over $14.6 billion in fraud was uncovered. There's play schemes where doctors were getting bonuses if they prescribed so much of a narcotic. Did you happen to see any of that come out?
I don't watch the news for my own mental health. I'm disconnected from politics and all the bullshit and fear porn that is just pumping through people's media screens, but it's interesting to hear.
I mean, honestly, I think it's a good thing, the government stepping in and finally shutting down a lot of these operations. Where, like you said, you were heavily over-medicated from the recommended doses that were normally implemented and stuff. And, it led to addiction and some other terrible issues. And unfortunately, it didn't help the end game, to say. After the investigation and stuff, what ended up being the cause of the accident?
It was multi-causal factors. The first was my flight lead took a pretty big hit because he had set us up outside of standard paths, as we call them, position, altitude, distance, and speed. That kind of put us in a dangerous situation from before the fight even started. It's such a high airspeed at a lower altitude. But again, that was just one little piece. Had we just done that and the fight went differently, it wouldn't have been an issue. The next thing was I had just been qualified with this Jehemix helmet, this really high-tech piece of equipment that was slightly distracting as I came to the merge. I didn't fully comprehend how high my airspeed had gotten, and so opted to maneuver the jet nose low at a higher than recommended airspeed. So that was a mistake on my part. Still, those two things could have happened and everything would have been fine. But then what really screwed me up was a computer system on the aircraft thought that there were bombs on the wings. And so it limited how hard I could perform the jet. So like going around a sharp corner in a sports car only to have the steering wheel kick back halfway. Basically, a computer overrode my control input and put us on a collision course for the ocean, which has, unfortunately caused mishaps and killed pilots that were much more experienced before me. And I know a pilot who was at the peak of his game a Top Gun graduate, at the pinnacle of his career and proficiency, who smashed into the side of a canyon wall on a low level because that system kicked in. And it's just a real insidious way that it kicks in. There's very little warning, and now all of a sudden the jet just doesn't turn. And when you're flying something where 2 seconds can be the difference between life and death, you don't have time to even process a little caution symbol that might pop up in one of your displays to address it. So,
is this during training or was it actual, mission?
it was a mission. I was already through flight school, but we still train for proficiency. And the dynamic training we do is as close to the real thing as possible. We're out bending these jets around at the edge of their capabilities. We're fighting them just like we would fight them in combat, which is honestly more dangerous than a lot of the shit that's done in at least the past 20 years of war. But where was I going? Yeah, we practice like we play. We're not hosing off live kinetics at each other. But other than that, we're doing it just as close to the real thing as possible. And operating at those speeds under that high G with those dynamic forces, there's wrong. It's just the nature of that job. And I was fortunate that. Oh, go ahead. I was going to say I was fortunate that when you do have a mishap like that, you're reviewed by a board of other naval aviators, largely in the strike fighter community, and they understand the nature of that job is dangerous and shit happens. I think on the commercial side of aviation, it's a little more hang the pilot out to dry, even if they made a tiny mistake. Whereas the Navy is very much like, hey, let's learn what happened. Now, if you've done something blatantly stupid or illegal or you are intoxicated or something, like, you're going to be done. You're going to lose your wings. But there's a case like mine where, I made a mistake. My flight lead had made a mistake. The aircraft had caused this compounded issue. They look at all of that and they consider it on a case-by-case basis. And so I was fortunate to get the opportunity to go back and fly.
You had more influential aspects via your healing and nature or via the treatments you've gotten at this point?
As far as treatments in the conventional medical system?
Whatever you want to consider this at this point and speak to it. Like if the pills fucking suck, tell us that. And if but in the sense of like, what's been your best healer so far?
I'm really grateful for, if you have a traumatic injury in the United States, there's no place I'd rather be. That's medicine at its finest. If they can take somebody in that broken state, get them into a trauma center and reconstruct their body and salvage their limbs from amputation and reconnect blood vessels, all the things that they did to salvage me after being that destroyed is incredible medicine. I have a great gratitude for the orthopedic surgeons and the vascular surgeons and all those incredible physicians that worked on me in that case. But the Western medical system, after that initial trauma repair, has a lot of issues. And that's where I found in the real recovery piece of things, not only from the physical rehabilitation, but the mental one that I went through later in my career for the brain injury and the soul injury that really took place. I found far greater benefit through more holistic, natural means and being in nature. And as you mentioned, like, nature is a healer. And when you're getting sunlight, when you're getting outside and breathing fresh air, when you're going for a walk in the woods or a bike ride through the woods, or you're going swimming in the ocean, going surfing in the ocean was one of the best stress relievers for me when I was dealing with heightened anxiety and my life was falling apart. So I'd say Western medicine's great for a trauma, but the recovery piece of it and all of mental health, nature is far superior. Not only in the nature of being connected to nature and the outdoors, but also these natural medicines that are coming from plants and fungi and animals like psilocybin mushrooms, like iboga, like ayahuasca, like bufo, these things that can heal the nervous system, the brain, and the soul and reconnect us to a higher sense of purpose and self and something far beyond ourselves that is profound, that reconnects us to nature. But yeah, nature's the real healer. And the further we drift from it, the sicker we get.
Speaking of nature, you mentioned that you like to get some of your food from hunting. Earlier, you mentioned that you were on a list which pretty much removed your rights to hunt. How tough was it to get those rights back?
I have not pursued the bureaucratic bullshit to go that route. And I'm just sticking by my Second Amendment right as an American citizen at this point. I can't purchase a new firearm, and I primarily hunt with a crossbow. So I guess I'm in a loophole there. But, I haven't. There's a way to actually get that reverse. I just would have to go get a physician to sign a bunch of forms and go through this whole bureaucratic bullshit process that I'm so fed up with bureaucracy and that nonsense. I've just disconnected from that system and, don't have to worry about it.
You mentioned that you went up to DC and advocated for stuff. What are some of the other things that you're doing to advocate for health and other people's rights?
A big part of what I do is speaking. I speak at nonprofit events, universities, high schools, corporate events. I speak at mastermind retreats. I've been speaking all over the country for the past 3 years. Another big thing that I do now is coaching. So I help people one-on-one dealing with their own health issues to achieve optimum health. So I do health and performance coaching as well as meditation and mindfulness coaching through another nonprofit. And then I wrote a book about all this called Phoenix Revival. There's obviously a lot more to my story. We did like a 5-minute recap of a lot of shit that happened. But if you'd like to learn more about my story, please pick up a copy of Phoenix Revival. You can get it on Amazon. I've got paperback, hardcover, ebook, and it's on Audible. I did the narration for it. If you're an Audible guy, that's how I typically get my books these days, on a road trip or something where I can listen to it with little kids and all. But
yeah, it's my list today. We'll throw that link up there. I'll let Ken-Zee get one more question and then we'll wrap it up.
I was actually going to give you some shit. I actually started your Audible book today.
Nice.
It was one that I had been on the list. I added it to the list kind of thing. And then I laughed because I saw you were the narrator. And I was like, oh, I got to give the Audible book a shot. And I got to be honest with you, man. If they had someone cover your voice for that book, it wouldn't be the same. And I'm 20 minutes in, I'm 30 minutes in, something like that, the drive home kind of thing. So kudos on what you're doing. I absolutely love everything there. What would you change out? Current policy, again, not the politics, not the religion, none of this Sky Daddy bullshit. I don't care about any of that. What would you do if you were in charge of the current administration's like health and what is it? Health and Human Services, HHS or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes that could happen in that system right now is to no longer consider corporations as people in the eyes of the government, and also allowing them to have unlimited campaign contributions. Whereas an American citizen, you're only allowed, I think it's maybe $1,500, $1,800 of a campaign contribution. Whereas if you're a corporation, the government apparently sees you as a person, so you get those rights, but you're not held to the same limitations of your corporate sponsorship of politics. And that's a major thing that I think if we just change that one thing, there would be profound impact throughout our whole political system. And that would kind of untie it from the corporations and maybe give a little bit more power back to the people. If I work directly in health and human services, I think, what Robert Kennedy's doing right now is a lot of good. He's purging this toxicity and corruption out of those systems. I think those are some good moves. I mean, he just fired a bunch of folks who had been destroying evidence that they had basically known that several of these vaccines were causing harm to children. And they covered it up and they tried to delete it and they got caught red-handed doing it. And now a lot of them are facing some sort of legal punishment and all of them have lost their jobs. So purging that type of corruption out of the system and untying this incestuous relationship between the pharmaceutical industry and our healthcare system, the more of that can continue to occur, the better.
You're not only a survivor, you're a messenger now and advocating for a lot of people. What's the number one thing you want others to take away from your story?
I want you to know that you have your health in your own hands. You don't have to trust anybody with it. And you can get back from incredible challenge if you can just have a spark of hope. There was times when I was in this dark place where I just crashed an $89 million jet. I was paralyzed. I was told I was never going to use my arms and legs. And I had all this shit coming down on me. But in that, I found this little spark of hope, which was, what if I could prove them wrong? And that's what I started to feed, was visualizing, where could I be? What's it going to look like? What's it going to be like getting back in the cockpit? And I encourage anybody out there that's struggling to do the same. Where do you want to be? What, if anything, was possible? And not only visualize that, but now start to take the discipline and consistent effort in the direction of that. You can't just visualize shit and it's going to happen. You have to work towards it every day, consistently. And that's where the discipline comes in. But I'm telling you, you have this within you. Anybody has this within you to take that path, no matter what you're going through. And it's amazing what the body, mind, and soul can heal from. It can come through crazy shit. And when you do, you may find yourself like me, where I am grateful for those challenges I've been through. There's a great quote from Carl Jung, which is, "No tree can grow to the heavens without roots into hell." And I think that's a beautiful thing, because when we go through these hardships and challenges, they can seem fucking awful in the moment. They can seem devastating. Like, why is this happening to me? But if you can put your head down and work your way through those problems and come out the other side and keep optimistic and working towards your goal, or whatever that may be, you're going to find yourself someday grateful for those things, because they transformed you and made you into the person you get to be, which is probably a larger person than you would have been before. Those hardships really help us develop as people, develop our character, develop, in those dark moments, that's when some of the greatest virtues of humanity are revealed. So whatever you're going through out there, I hope this maybe inspires a little spark of hope. I know there's a lot of shit out in the world trying to get you down, piss you off, divide you from people, make you angry and hopeless, but don't let them win. Don't give the machine that's what it wants. And if you can keep optimistic and happy and rebuild your health, you will take away their control. And we don't need their bullshit. We can break free from it.
Well, I could have said it better. That was wow. I appreciate that message, and I appreciate you being here with us and joining us. I can't thank you enough.
Can we get some final thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead and throw a final thought out there.
Did you experience any temporal distortion, dilution? Hang on, I'm sorry, 1 second here. Temporal distortion. So a change in the perception of time where it may seem to speed up, slow down, or even reverse. Basically, This was asked pilot to pilot here, and we're curious to hear your thoughts.
I did experience, I've experienced that a few times in my life. There's one was when I was a kid learning how to do a front flip on my skis. And while I was inverted sailing through the air, pretty certain I was about to break my neck, time stopped. And I just had a moment to just be there inverted, flying over the snow, afraid that this was going to be my last breath. But I also felt that temporal distortion. I felt that right before I pulled the ejection handle, when, the aircraft was blaring, altitude, pull up. There was a moment as the ocean was rushing up at me, this overwhelming sense of ground rush, where everything just paused. And I could see the ripples of the current. I could see the white caps. And in that moment, it was just like this snapshot that paused. And after that, I have no linear memory. It was like my body automatically assumed the ejection position. I automatically pulled the ejection handle with no memory. But right before I completely lost consciousness and memory, any linear memory, for about 2 weeks, I had that temporal distortion for sure.
What you got, Randy?
I just want to use it to tell you thank you. You have one hell of a story, man. It is, glad you were still with us. And I'm glad that you are taking a negative and, really shining a light onto some of the things that people don't really have a big enough voice or enough courage to go out and attack and really talk about, to put yourself out there with the mental illness aspect, to the over medication, and then to go out there and actually do something about it. I just want to thank you for what you're doing, and just keep up the good work, man. I can't wait to read the book.
Yeah, it's an honor, man. I appreciate you guys elevating voices like mine to help get this word out to more and more people. I think we live in an absolutely beautiful time, and something that I think is going to help save us from all this bullshit we've been talking about is the fact that we can talk openly about this. This is something that previous generations of veterans didn't have. They didn't have an outlet like this to share what's really going on. And I think we're hearing a lot of voices in these long form podcasts that are, you can't deny these people's firsthand experience. And it's really shifting our society in a positive way. So thank you guys for being part of that and sharing the truth.
Again, when I emailed you, I said it to you directly in that email. I was very fucking excited to talk to you, and I meant every word of it. This has been incredible. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here with us tonight, man.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Jess.
And I appreciate it.
Get to those little ones.
I will.
Take care.
We're going to go read some Goosebumps, man.
That's good.